prediction, crash, and also possibly a shutdown of the stock market on March 13th, 2026. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. This email, or also this video, is documenting the prediction that the US stock market will crash on Friday, March 13th, 2026. Specifically this date. It'll be a black swan financial event, which is an unexpected, shocking event. It is predicted that also this will be the initial shocking event, the initial shock to what will become the biggest stock market crash in history. It is also predicted, or also I should say speculated, it's not necessary for this prediction, but it's also speculated that on March 13th, trading will be temporarily halted. The loss in the S&P 500 stock index on March 13th is speculated to be large enough to trigger a circuit breaker that temporarily shuts down trading. Trading is halted when the S&P 500 index loses 7%, 13%, and 20% in one trading day. In other words, the S&P 500 index is speculated to lose on this March 13th date 7% or possibly 13% or 20%. And again, the post date of this video and this email and forensic notes PDF document is documenting that this prediction is being made ahead of time. This knowledge of this prediction for March 13th, 2026 has been known since early or late February. Late February. Well, the date here is March 7th in this email, but this was known a week or two even before this. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that a stock crash on Wall Street will occur on March 13th, 2026. It'll be a very significant day, a very significant crash, a very significant large loss in the stock market. It will be like a black swan event. This is the prediction. Similar to Black Monday, for example, in 1987, or Black Thursday or Black Tuesday in the beginning of the 1929 stock market crash. Okay, it's also speculated that at some point during the day on March 13th, trading will be temporarily halted. If the loss is large enough, it triggers a circuit breaker which halts trading. And it is also predicted that this will be the beginning of the biggest stock market crash in all of history, which will obviously take more than one day to unfold, but this will be the beginning of it. That's also what's being predicted, specifically for March 13th, Friday the 13th. In this video, we will talk about reasons for how this is known ahead of time, which will prove that this prediction is from the righteous Christian God of the Bible. As you will see, these reasons that I'll be explaining could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being. And so this will destroy the atheistic or the agnostic atheist's worldview. That's the intention here. We need to do away with this late 18th century model of the world called materialism. It's well past time that it goes into the garbage, this fairy tale for adults. Okay, but that said, the majority of people are not agnostic atheist or atheist today in the West. The majority of people would say they do believe in a God, quote unquote, but not like the God of the Bible. In other words, what they mean, without realizing what they mean because they haven't thought about it enough, they don't know very much. But what they mean is that the Indian religion has replaced Christianity in the West in the form of New Age thinking, ideas. God is an impersonal energy that is the universe itself, collective consciousness, reincarnation, etc. Which is, of course, fundamentally in conflict with the personal being that isn't the creation, but created the creation. The word holy means separate from. So the two worldviews are incompatible. They are not different paths up the same mountain, etc. This nonsense of the religious egalitarians, if you will. Now, religious liberalism, actually. So let's begin with these reasons that I'll be explaining that will prove everything here. Not that these reasons are necessary, because the date of this prediction documents this, that this is being predicted ahead of time, and that's enough. I mean, of course. I'm predicting what I just said for March 13th, and if it happens, there's not even necessary for any prediction, for any reasons. All you need at that point is for me to tell you how I know. And I know far better than you or anyone how I know. So don't tell me how I know. If you're a New Ager, don't tell me I tapped into the collective consciousness. I know more than you how I know. If you are a Christian or a Muslim, don't tell me that demons told me. I know more than you how I know. You are a fool to not take me seriously. I know more than you how this prediction is known, and I know why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And it is to prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, but also, importantly, the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video. Now, specifically, we're going to talk about a few things that relate to prophetic signs that happened 4 days before March 13th on March 9th. So on this day, the lead singer for the music band Boston died. He died from brain cancer. This relates to Paul Simon because God is using Paul Simon to point to the coming demonic possession of people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist through their brains, which is why it is predicted at this time, I believe it'll be in November, well, specifically on Thanksgiving in 2028, but it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head and then die, like Elvis Presley. Many people don't know that Elvis Presley actually died from his head injury that he had suffered 10 years prior, which is why he was taking the drugs that he was taking, which killed him. But it was actually his brain injury. Anyway, and of course, Paul Simon's most best-selling album is Graceland, named after the mansion in which Elvis Presley died. That's another subject. I mean, I could go on literally for a couple of hours regarding God's prophetic use of Paul Simon. Now, the thing about Paul Simon, I'm jumping ahead, but he symbolizes 9/11. This is because he cold opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11. 4 days after 9/11. Which is why we have this sign involving the band Boston 4 days before the predicted crash on Wall Street, which is right next to where the towers crashed on 9/11. And the planes crashed into the towers. Crash to crash. The reason why Boston is relevant is because the planes departed Boston. In other words, what I'm describing here is a 9/11 sign, and it does relate to Paul Simon, because he symbolizes 9/11, but also he's a singer. He's of the generation of the band Boston, and this guy died from a brain injury, brain cancer. Paul Simon's predicted to die from brain cancer. A brain injury. Now, the band, this guy's interesting, and God uses these interest stories for prophetic reasons. He was actually a fan of the band and became a member of the band after he posted a long tribute to the band on the MySpace, the predecessor to Facebook. And he has been the band leader, singer for the last 20 years, after, I guess, the previous singer died. Okay. Now, this date of the prediction of the crash on Wall Street will be exactly 1,013 months after the date 1013 in 1941, when Paul Simon was born. That's quite something. 1013, 1013 hints at the date 1013. This 313 date of this predicted crash that'll point to 9/11 hints at Paul Simon, who symbolizes 9/11. This crash will be 1013 months exactly after his birth on the date 1013. Okay, now this date 313 of the predicted crash will be 9 months exactly after Paul Simon performed in Boston on June 13th, 2025, the same day as Operation Midnight Hammer, which was a prophetic sign as well. When asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains, and the average human gestation period is 9 months. Also, the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. So we have a second witness, confirmation, to Paul Simon being used to point to this date 313. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so these are two witnesses that confirm the matter. On March 5th, 4 days before March 9th, which again is 4 days before March 13th, the date of the prediction. So in other words, 4 plus 4 days before March 13th, on March 5th, Paul Simon performed at Love Rocks, New York City, which is a charity event. Okay, and 4 plus 4 hits at 44, and God pairs 9 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. If we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together. And I know that the numbers are 9 and 44 because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 8 years, for more than 4 plus 4 years. The reason for 9 and 44 being paired together is that the 44th president was inaugurated in 2009. Also, the 44th president is the Antichrist, which is judgment on America. The number 9 symbolizes judgment. Elvis Presley flew out his 9-year-old daughter on the day that he died in the 4 times 4th state. Elvis Presley in his mansion in Little Egypt in Memphis, named after Memphis, Egypt, hints at the king of Egypt because Elvis is the king of Egypt in the Bible in his mansion, who is symbolism for the Antichrist in the Bible. Now, Paul Simon has 2 hits, Loves Me Like a Rock and I Am a Rock with Art Garfunkel. I think I Am a Rock was their second song, their second hit, I think, if I recall correctly. In the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. And so Paul Simon, Mr. Loves Me Like a Rock and I Am a Rock performed at Love Rocks, New York City. Paul Simon is symbolic of New York City. He's from New York City, but also he symbolizes 9/11. And he opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live in New York City after 9/11. And he opened with The Boxer, which is about punching people and getting them to collapse onto the mat. And 9/11 was about the collapse of towers. If relevant, after being slapped by Will Smith, Chris Rock had his first public appearance, performance, comedy special at the Wilbur Theater in Boston on March 30th, 2022. Exactly 1440 days before March 9th and the death of the singer from the band Boston. This was prophetic because the slapping of Chris Rock by Will Smith was an extremely prophetic sign, which I won't explain all of it here, of course. And Chris Rock, as in Loves Me Like a Rock, Paul Simon. Chris Rock, as in Christian, rock being the symbol of Christ in the Bible. Chris Rock made his first public statements, comments about the slapping at the beginning of his performance at the Wilbur Theater in Boston, a few days after the Oscar Awards ceremony that he hosted. Okay. So why is 1440 days relevant? This March 9th date, the date of the death of the singer from Boston, is 1,753 days to the predicted asteroid rock slap on Earth on December 26th, 2030. This big event that's described in the book of Revelation chapter 8, which begins with the first verse of chapter 8 with a description of the sound of silence in heaven. Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career was The Sound of Silence. The sum of the divisors of 1753 is 4,440, which hints at the 444th word in the Strong's Greek Concordance, which is the word for man, which is why, incidentally, the Antichrist is the 44th president. The rock smashes the statue of a man in Daniel chapter 2 in the Bible. Okay, the coming rock slap of earth is a parallel analogous to a metaphor for the rock that smashes the statue of the man in Daniel chapter 2. This extremely important prophecy in the Bible. The statue of the man symbolizes the times of the Gentiles, which unfolds in history leading up to the Antichrist. Long story short. The statue is broken up into 4 sections, hence the 4,440 number connection here. But also, the first of the 4, the dream that's being interpreted by Daniel, was had by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and the first of the 4 sections of the statue symbolizes this king and Babylon. Babylon is symbolized by the fact, or this number, 1440, because we have 1440 minutes in a day, which we inherited from ancient Babylon. The reason why there are 24 hours of 60 minutes each, or 1440 minutes in a day, is because of ancient Babylon. Therefore, the 1440 days connection, followed by the 4440 connection, is relevant. Because it's relevant because this connects from the day Chris Rock was at the Wilbur Theater in Boston, which connects to the death of the singer from Boston, which connects to the slap of Earth by a rock, this coming asteroid. And Chris Rock was slapped by Will, which is why he was at the Wilbur Theater. Okay? All right. Also, incidentally, this date 330 hints at Genesis 3:22, which is why God is using this in his signs. It's symbolic of the coming lie from the Antichrist and the promise of immortality without God. Long story short. Just another witness confirmation of the prophetic significance of all of this. Okay, so this is amazing. Hopefully I'm explaining it well enough for you to appreciate. The head of the statue represents Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. Babylon is equal to 1440 minutes in a day. Oh, I already read that. Okay, so Simon at the Love Rocks New York City event on March 5th is 4 days before the singer died on March 9th, which is 4 days before the predicted crash. Now, like I said earlier, God pairs numbers to confirm the signs and connections. The numbers he pairs is 23, 9, and 44. The date 313 hints at 3 divided by 13 equals 0.230. There is no other date in the calendar that gives us a number like this followed by a 0, a two-digit number followed by a 0. And so this 4 plus 4 days pairs with the 23 of the date, which, as I said earlier, is 9 months exactly after Simon performed in Boston. You see? It's amazing. I don't need to draw a diagram, I don't think. It's pretty straightforward, right? If I drew a diagram, you could see it, right? This 4 plus 4 days, the middle date is connected with the 9 months, but it all ultimately connects to this 23 date. And it's all relevant because of The Rock and Boston, 9/11, Paul Simon in Boston, okay? All right, and it's all relevant because of Babylon and the Antichrist. Babylon being the symbol for pagan religion, which the Antichrists will lead. Now, in the dream, in the prophecy, the rock smashed the statue and it broke into pieces. This is like a collapse or crash. What's predicted for March 13th is a stock market collapse or crash. See? And it'll be the beginning of the downfall of the times of the Gentiles, when the financial system collapses. I mean, completely. It's going to completely collapse. Not like in 2008. Okay? The whole system is going to collapse. And from the ashes will rise the digital programmable currency that will be used to restrict the buying and selling of food to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, when food will be rationed. I believe the rationing of food will be before the asteroid hits Earth, but definitely afterwards, as the impact will affect the crops of food. All right, now, as I said, Paul Simon's birth date is 1013 months after his birth on the date 1013. He sang, "I Am a Rock," "Loves Me Like a Rock," and sang at Love Rocks, New York City. By the way, the Love Rocks. Well, never mind. Okay, after being slapped by Will Smith, Chris Rock. Wait a second. I already said this. Okay. Okay, so Simon Loves Me Like a Rock, New York City, on the date March 5th. 4 days to the death of the Boston singer. Then 4 days to March 13th. 44. March 13th, 23. Predicted crash, collapse. 9 months after Simon was in Boston. 9, 23, and 44 pairing, like I said. The Rock smashed the statue and it broke. Simon performed The Boxer at Love Rocks, New York City. Boxing hints at the smashing of a man, which hints at the statue in Daniel chapter 2 that's smashed by the rock. This is amazing. This is clearly Daniel chapter 2. Paul Simon's performance of the boxer at Love Rocks is a Daniel chapter 2 smashing of the statue of a man by a rock prophecy, prophetic sign. Because again, in the prophecy, the giant statue is smashed by a rock taken from a mountainside, falls from the sky onto the statue, like the coming asteroid will, if I didn't make that clear earlier. But boxing is about smashing a man. And he performed the boxer at Love Rocks, as in the rock that smashed the statue of a man. Now, what's interesting here is that there is this actor, former professional wrestler, nicknamed The Rock. Okay, and his most recent movie is called The Smashing Machine. And in the movie, he plays a boxer. But there's more. Okay. Pope Francis's predicted resurrection on May 2nd, 2029 will be Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. It'll be his 57th birthday. In simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, the word vaccine equals 57. And those who don't take it will not be able to buy and sell food, like I just said. May 2nd is the 122nd day of the calendar year. The name Pope Francis is equal to 122 in simple English gematria. And the Rock was born in the year 72. And 72 is not only 66 plus 6, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, but 72 is also 2 times 6 times 6. And Pope Francis was the 266th Pope. He's predicted to be resurrected from the dead by demons in 2029. Now, Dwayne Johnson gives us D and J, giving us the numbers 4 and 10, fourth and 10th letter of the alphabet, which hints at the number 41, which is the number God uses to hint at the word key, equivalent to 41 in simple English gematria. In Bible prophecy, it is a key that opens the door to the bottomless pit from which demons will emerge and resurrect Pope Francis at the Vatican. And the symbol for the Vatican is keys. And that's why, by the way, the symbol for the Vatican is keys. Because all along, it was always known from Old Testament prophecy that's far more than clear that a pope would eventually be the Antichrist. And like I said at the beginning, the reason for this prediction that is from God, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. There is zero, absolutely zero, none, no debate at all regarding the controversial things that I am saying. Case closed. This is the purpose of prophecy. And I have the authority to tell you the reason and purpose for this prediction. I know more than you. I know more than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. Okay? I do not care to elaborate anymore. I need to make this video as short as possible. And I've explained these things countless times in other videos. And so it's time to just accept what I'm saying and stop playing the Antichrist guessing game if you are an evangelical that loves to do that because of your heretical salvation doctrine that has you falsely interpret 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Okay? And the mark of the Antichrist does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship. It did, for those who are wise, come with a false form of religious worship. Wokeism and leftist politics. And it does not need a new age of supposed dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is in fact judgment for this particular doctrine. And the prediction being made in this video will prove everything that I just said. If you are a Christian, watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. Now, moving on. The Rock's 57th birthday on May 2nd, 2029, and the predicted resurrection of the Antichrist, Pope Francis, will be 603 days, which since at 3/6 is in 666, which is also the 63rd semi-prime number. Well, no, sorry. God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and 603 is 201 plus 201 plus 201, which is the 63rd semi plus 63rd semi plus 63rd semi-prime number, to the predicted asteroid hit on Earth, the smash of the rock, the slap, on December 26, 2030. Okay, is there a reason why this 10-13 months exactly between this prediction for the crash on Wall Street to the birth of Paul Simon on the date 10-13, and Paul Simon is predicted to fall and crash onto his head and die as a result? Why is 10-13 the 170th prime number? Does the 170th prime number of months to the date 313 pair with the 9 months? Because 9 and 17 pair together. Because Obama was president from 09 till 17. Well, yes. Because the day that Paul Simon performed the Daniel chapter 2 sign with the Simon Loves Rocks, New York City, 4 plus 4 days to Wall Street, the predicted Wall Street crash on the date that hints at 23. Okay, so the answer to why 170th prime number of months pairs with the 9 months connection, both of these months connections to this date involving Paul Simon, because again, the 9 months connects to when Paul Simon performed in Boston, and this is the connection to his birth. So 9 and 17 connect Paul Simon to March 13th, but why? Well, 9 times 17 is 153. One of 3 unusually specific numbers in the New Testament, which is the number of fish that were miraculously caught in the net that was in Jesus' last miracle, 200 cubits from shore, which hints at the end of the age of fishing for men after 2,000 years. Paul Simon is symbolic of the fishers of men, because the leader of the fisher for men of the Gentiles was Paul, and the leader of the fisher of men for the Jews was Peter, whose name was Simon, before Jesus changed his name to Peter. So Paul Simon hints at the fishers of men. And that's why. Now, but also the Love Rocks performance was 5 months and 2 days. Or 153 days after The Smashing Machine was released in theaters on October 3rd last year, which is again about a boxer, and Paul Simon sang The Boxer at Love Rocks, and The Boxer stars The Rock, which again hints at the rock that smashes the statue of a man, which is what boxing is, smashing of a man. Okay, the reason why 5 months and 2 days is because The Rock was born on 5/2, but it's also 153 days, and that's relevant to Paul Simon. And also, 153 days is the 17th triangular number. Speaking of the 170th prime months connection. Now, March 13th will be 227 days after the 8.8 magnitude earthquake in Russia. And The Rock, the day that he posted The Sound of Silence by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel on Instagram. So he's making a joke. His daughters were applying makeup to all over his face and his bald head. And he just sat there in silence, letting them do it, letting them play with him. And he posted the video of it on Instagram along with the song The Sound of Silence by Paul Simon, who sings I Am a Rock and Loves Me Like a Rock. And it was The Rock that posted this. When the rock slaps Earth, it'll cause earthquakes around the globe. This was one of the strongest earthquakes of the since the beginning of the 20th century. 8.8, well, Francis died at the age of 88. 227 because the closest fraction to pi is 22 over 7. Pi is 3.14, pi is prophetic because when Moses asked for the name for God, God replied in Exodus 3:14 with the name I am, and the symbol for I am in Hebrew is the exact same symbol for pi, 3.14, Exodus 3:14. Well, anyway, 3.14 hints at Isaiah chapter 31:4, which is about the Antichrist, Pope Francis. Now, The Rock posted Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence, which is, again, what's described at the beginning of Revelation chapter 8, the chapter that also describes the slapping of Earth by an asteroid. So The Rock posted Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence, which hints at Revelation chapter 8, on the day of the 8.8 earthquake. And Jesus equals 888 in Greek gematria, as I mentioned. But this date of the post, which was July 29th, by the way, was exactly 9 times 11 days after Pope Francis's death at the age of 88. And again, it was an 8.8 earthquake. The reason why 9 times 11 days is astounding here because it hints at Revelation 9:11, which is the verse that symbolizes the coming opening of the bottomless pit by a key, as in the Vatican, and the resurrection of Pope Francis and the demonic possession of people who take the mark of the Antichrist. After they are promised immortality through taking the mark of the Antichrist without God. Hence the 3:22 connection I mentioned earlier. And so, in other words, this is amazing. We have the Paul Simon, The Rock, 8.8 earthquake, 9 times 11 days after the death of Francis at the age of 88. And again, Francis is predicted to be resurrected on Francis's birthday. Sorry, The Rock is, on The Rock's birthday. the 57th birthday, which hints at the shots that will cause the demonic possession when the demons rise from the bottomless pit on the day that Francis was resurrected from the dead, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, hence the 9 times 11 days connection here. This is amazing. This is an amazing thing here in this highlighted sentence. Hopefully I explained it well enough. The Rock posted Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence, Revelation chapter 8, on the day of the 8.8 earthquake, 13 weeks and 3 days, which since at the date that Pope Francis was elected on the date 313 in the year 13, exactly 13 years before this year's date 313, which is the predicted date of the crash on Wall Street. Well, anyway, so again, The Rock, whose birthday will be on the day of the resurrection of Pope Francis after he died at the age of 88, he posted about Revelation chapter 8 through The Sound of Silence on the day of the 8.8 earthquake, 13 weeks and 3 days after Francis's, and he was elected on the date 313 after Francis's prophetic funeral. And he died at the age of 88. And the funeral was in Rome, and Rome converted to Catholicism in 313 AD, which is why Francis was elected on the date 313. Because it's all Babylon, and when Rome converted to Catholicism, it didn't do away with its Babylonian religion. It just repackaged it into a wrapper to make it look like Christianity, which is what it did when it took Catholicism around the world too. It didn't discourage the pagan beliefs of its indigenous population. It just told them to repackage it to make it look like Christianity. And this is the thing that God hates the most in the Bible. Catholics don't know the Bible, I mean literally, most of them. But the thing that God hates the most in the Bible is the mixing of true religion with the false pagan religion of the Jews' neighbor. The Jews were constantly being chastised for mixing their true religion with the pagan religion of their neighbors. And ultimately, they were exiled to Babylon for it, which is why Babylon is symbolic of pagan religion. It's the home of all of the pagan religion. That's why Peter in the Bible referred to Rome as Babylon. And no, Peter was never in Rome, contrary to the Catholic propaganda. Okay, so anyway, that's why 13 weeks and 3 days is astounding. From the day that The Rock posted Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence on the day of the 8.8 earthquake. 13 weeks and 3 days to Francis's funeral after he died at 88. And The Rock is predicted to have his 57th vaccine birthday on the day of Francis's resurrection. Fantastic. Now, October 13th, 41. Again, 41 is equal to key, which is the thing that will be used to open the door to the bottomless pit. Okay, Paul Simon was born on this date, the date 1013, exactly 1013 months, or the 170th prime number of months, which hints at the 17th triangular number, 153 fish. Paul, Peter, Simon, fishers of men. Okay, I kind of already did that already. Paul Simon symbolizes 9/11 and the crashes next to Wall Street because he again opened the broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11 with the boxer, which is about knocking collapsing people to the ground. And he also sang at the 10th anniversary at the memorial. 9/11 is when the second plane with a crew of 9 people crashed into the second tower 17 minutes after the first plane. 9 times 17 equals 153. Equals fishers of men. Equals Paul, Peter, Simon. Okay, Paul Simon's birth, 170 the prime number of months to 313 Wall Street crash. Paul Simon in Boston, where the 9/11 flights took off from, is 9 months to the March 13th crash on Wall Street, next to 9/11, where the towers crashed on 9/11. What I'm establishing here is the 9 and the 17 here that give us Paul Simon through the 153 number and fishers of men, right? This predicted crash next to where 9/11 happened, and Paul Simon symbolizes 9/11, on March 13th, connects with Paul Simon through 9 months and the 170th prime number of months, which gives us 9 and 17, 153 fish, and Paul Simon, fishers of men. March 5th, 2026, the day that Simon sang the Boxer in New York City, where he sang the Boxer after 9/11, raised 2 times $3 million. And it was 4 days before the singer of Boston died, and Boston is in the 2 times third state. These hint at 23. 2 times third state, 2 times 3 million. And the 4 and 4 days gives us 44. But also the date that it connects to, the 4 plus 4 days, gets us to the date that symbolizes 23. In other words, this is a pairing of 23 and 44, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, as I said. The reason is the 44th president is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. The building blocks of God's signs are identifying the Antichrist. I mean, the foundation of God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel and will be proven to be true when the predictions come to pass, is built upon identifying the Antichrist. And so you really need to stop the Antichrist guessing game and learn how your heretical salvation doctrine that has you interpret 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and what is holding back the Antichrist is the Holy Spirit. Learn how your doctrine is wrong, because it's very important. Watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. The 9/11 flights were from Boston. Simon equals 9/11. It took me this, originally, these are all notes that came in the order that I received the insights. And it took a while to realize, well, wait a second, the reason for all this Boston is because the flights took off from Boston on 9/11. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, but I didn't know that as I was writing what I was writing before. But I still recognized the significance of the Boston connections here. I don't say this to brag. I just say this to prove that this is from God. Now, the date 3/13, again, hints at 23/0. And it is also exactly 23 weeks after the release of The Smashing Machine, starring The Rock, as in the predicted smashing of Wall Street, if you will, or the smashing of planes on 9/11 near Wall Street. So wait, ... The Rock plays a boxer in The Smashing Machine. I forgot about this. This connects to Simon and the boxer that he sang on 9/11, and also the boxer that he sang at the Love Rocks charity in New York City a few days ago. 3/13 or 23 is also, wait, I just read that. At the 23rd prime number Golden Globes, in other words, the 83rd, and globe hints at the rock that will slap Earth, the globe. The Rock, the actor, was nominated for Best Actor for The Smashing Machine. Amazing, right? Right? Because again, this 23rd prime number of Golden Globes hints at the 23 weeks connection from The Smashing Machine to this predicted smashing and crashing on Wall Street, next to where the towers were smashed by machines, airplanes. Wow. Now, The Rock plays a boxer named Mark Kerr. Mark hints at the mark of the Antichrist. And again, the rock's 57th birthday, as in vaccine, as in mark of the Antichrist, will be on the predicted date of the resurrection of Pope Francis. And by the way, the resurrection of Pope Francis on May 2nd, 2029 was recognized long before the connection of the rock. In other words, it wasn't figured out that that's the date because of the rock's birthday. But that's why that makes it even more interesting that it is the rock's 57th birthday. It's like more confirmation. All right, so the movie was a box office bomb. Okay. Now, it is predicted that at some point there will be a dirty bomb explosion and in Manhattan and an evacuation from Manhattan Island. But at this time, I don't know what date that is. But it could very well be that the bombing of the smashing machine will connect to whatever date that is. Okay, the movie The Smashing Machine also stars Emily Blunt. Blunt hints at blunt force, as in to smash a rock. Emily Blunt is in the upcoming movie Disclosure Day about aliens, the Steven Spielberg movie, which gives us DD in 44, the 44th president who will preside over the rise of demons from the bottomless pit that will pretend to be aliens. And Emily Blunt starred in the movie Oppenheimer about the Manhattan Project, which God is using to hint at nuclear weapons and also the coming dirty bomb in Manhattan. The Smashing Machine only made 7 plus 7 plus $7 million, 3 sets of 7. And the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. And we are predicting a collapse on Wall Street connected through the Smashing Machine, which made 7 plus 7 plus $7 million. The movie cost 25 times 2 million, and that hints at the number that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, 2520 days, which is only symbolism. We are already well inside the final 2520 days. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. I don't need to explain that anymore. It's only symbolism, so you can stop wasting your time looking for that date. Now, March 13th is 156 days. 156th prime number is 911, which hints at 9/11. So this predicted crash on Wall Street next to where the towers collapsed on 9/11 is 156 days before what I think will be a step in the trail of signs to the predicted dirty bomb. I don't think this will be the date. I could be wrong. It could be the date of the dirty bomb, but I don't think so. It is August 16th, 2026. But it'll more than likely be a step in the trail of signs that'll further lead on to the date. Okay, on the day that the duck boat was raised from the bottom of Table Rock Lake in Missouri, and the maximum depth of that lake is 220 feet. The 220-pound rock smashed the steps of the Gentile worship area at the western wall on the 9th of Av. Okay, let's just pause there. Okay. This is a lot. Okay, so again, in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. On 9/11, there were 2 towers that were 110 stories high. A total of 220 stories collapsed. It was the World Trade Center. It was symbolism for the statue in Daniel chapter 2. The statue that represents the times of the Gentiles, the world. The times of the Gentiles being the period of rule of the world by various Gentile empires, leading up to the rule of the world of Christ from Jerusalem, when Israel will rule the world. So this is the symbolism contained in the smashing, the crashing of the towers. It's the rock that smashes the steps, or rather the feet of the statue in Daniel chapter 2. And the reason for 220 is because a couple of reasons here. First, the Israelites entered the promised land on the date 110 in the Hebrew calendar, the 10th day of the month of Nisan, the first month. So the date 110. Also, they were led by Joshua, who died at the age of 110. Jesus also entered Jerusalem officially in what is called the triumphal entry, when he entered Jerusalem on the donkey as the Messiah. He officially arrived as the Messiah, as prophesied in the book of Daniel, on the exact date prophesied in the book of Daniel. Believe it or not, the exact date, which was Nisan 10, the date 110. All right? So in other words, the date 110 symbolizes the first coming of Jesus. On 9/11, it was 2 towers that were 110 stories, which hints at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, the 222nd word in Strong's Greek Concordance is the word rooster, which is the symbol for Peter. Because, of course, Peter denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. It's also said in the book of Mark, before the rooster will crow twice, Peter would deny him 3 times, Jesus prophesied. That hints at the number 23. That's why the Antichrist wore jersey number 23. Because the mark of the Antichrist, taking it, is tantamount to denying Jesus. And Peter symbolizes the denial of Jesus, and the crow crowed twice before Peter denied him 3 times. Or after, whatever. So that's why 23 pairs of chromosomes. Because the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, 23 pairs of them. It's all biblical. It's all about the Bible. That's why we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Because of the rooster crowing twice before or after Peter would deny him 3 times. 23. And it is in that order in the book of Mark. 2 crows and 3 denials by Peter. Anyway, the name Peter was given to Simon by Jesus after Simon was the first of the disciples to state out loud that Jesus is the Messiah that was prophesied. And then Jesus said to Peter, or Simon, you are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my church. Now, Catholics have twisted that in order to support their entire religion, because the entire Catholic religion hinges on this one verse, because they claim that it gives them the authority to create all of this man-made religion, so through supposed descendants of Peter. But without this one verse, the whole religion is invalid. It all comes down to this one verse. But this one verse is easily disproven. And so therefore the whole Catholic religion is easily disproven. Because the words Petra and Petros are two different Greek words. Why would Jesus give him two different names like that? But it's also how he said it. Simon, you are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my church. Jesus did not say he was going to build his church on Peter, a man, which is blasphemy, which is exactly why the Catholic Church is blasphemy. The office of papacy is blasphemy. Claiming to be the representative of Christ on earth is blasphemy. And it's a man-centered church. And in the Bible, if the Catholics understood the Bible or knew it, they would know that man is inherently corrupt and becomes more corrupt with time, which is why the Catholic Church has become more corrupt with time. Well, in certain ways. Not always. Anyway, the point is that, well, by the way, if I hadn't said it already, I don't hate Catholics, of course. I'm trying to help Catholics, but I also don't believe that Catholics won't be saved, and I don't believe God hates Catholics. Okay? And if Catholics are saved, though, it will be in spite of their Catholicism and not because of it. Because contrary to what many quote-unquote Christians believe, we do not get saved on what we intellectually believe. And yes, that does mean that there will be people from other faiths that do get a second chance, at least. And regarding that, that's another thing that evangelicals or most Christians don't understand about the Bible. And Peter wrote about it. There's all kinds of verses that support this, but there will be a second chance of people that were, for example, born before Christ or in their lifetime didn't have a full opportunity, like, for example, places outside of the West, especially, for example, in Muslim countries or not even Muslim countries. People will have a fair opportunity, if they didn't get one during their life, to hear the gospel. Okay, so there's three camps. There's those that pass from life to life, those that pass from life to the second death after they pay for their sin in hell. But there will also be those, which is the majority of people in all of history, in the third camp, which will get a second chance to hear the gospel in Sheol, the in-between place. But it's not like purgatory, like Catholicism. Anyway. So, yes, Petros means rock, like a stone or a pebble. Petra means bedrock, which is what you build a foundation on, a building. You build a building, its foundation is on the bedrock, which is why Jesus said what he said. Simon, you are Petros, and on this Petra, the truth that Peter had just stated about him being the Messiah, Jesus is going to build his church. He's going to build his church on the fact that Jesus is the Messiah, not Peter. Okay, so back to what I was saying. This 220 number, in other words, is symbolism for rock. Right? Again, because G220 is rooster, which is Peter, which is rock, which is Jesus in the Bible. So the 220-foot deep Table Rock Lake had from it raised the duck boat after it sank on the early morning that on the same morning that a 220-pound rock smashed the steps of the Gentile worship area. Again, the statue that's smashed by a rock in the Daniel chapter 2 represents the times of the Gentiles and their Gentile worship, etc. The feet of the statue is smashed with the rock, which is why in this prophetic sign it was the steps leading to the Gentile worship area that was smashed by the 220-pound rock that fell from the western wall, the last remaining wall of the Temple Mount complex, which was destroyed on the 9th of Av by the Romans, which is why this rock fell on the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar in 2019. And also on this day, to confirm all of this, and God uses records for signs, a record 1,440 Jews visited the Temple Mount. That record may have been broken since then, but this was at the time a record. And it was 1,440. Which again, if I think I mentioned earlier, I'm sure, in this video. No, was it this video? No, it was the last video I made earlier. Okay. No, it was this video. 1440 is symbolism for Babylon because of the 1,440 minutes in a day. And the Jews were exiled to Babylon after the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av by the Babylonians, because it was destroyed on the 9th of Av by the Babylonians and the Romans, because that was all designed by God to have it done on the same date. And why did they get exiled to Babylon again? Because they were mixing their true religion with the false religion of the pagan neighbors, just like Catholics do. When they worship Mary, the ancient fertility goddess, for example. Okay, so now this 9th of Av date, when the 220-pound rock fell and smashed the steps of the Gentile worship area, just amazing. On the same day that the duck boat was raised from Table Rock Lake, that has a depth of 220 feet, this was July 23rd, 2018. This date is 91 months and 10 days, which hints at 9/11, before Peter sang in New York City. Simon. Simon Peter. Paul Simon. Right? At the Love Rocks in New York City, where 9/11 took place. Simon symbolizes 9/11 because he sang the boxer at the opening of the broadcast of the first one after 9/11. And boxing is about smashing a man, as in smashing the statue with the rock in the prophecy. Now, the thing too about this duck boat tragedy is that I'm jumping ahead. Let me read it as I wrote it then. 17 people drowned in the duck boat tragedy, 9 of which were from the same family. Table Rock Lake has the almost exact same water volume and surface area as the Sea of Galilee. A big coincidence, designed by God. The Sea of Galilee is where the 9 times 17 fish were caught in the net in Jesus' last miracle, the 153 fish, which, as I mentioned earlier, is why it hints at Paul Simon, or Paul Simon hints at that, because the name Paul Simon hints at the 2 fishers of men, Paul and Simon Peter. On 9/11, which is symbolized by Paul Simon, 9 crew smashed the second tower 17 minutes after the first plane. And that's relevant because that's when the world realized that it wasn't an accident, the first plane. Because as I said, God works on the principle of second and other witnesses to confirm a matter. After the first plane crashed, the world was watching and wondering if it was an accident or an act of terrorism. And then it was confirmed for them right in front of their eyes, live, as it happened, 17 minutes later, with the crew of 9, which confirmed that it was an act of terrorism and therefore an act of evil, and it was from God. The reason why 9 crew is relevant is because in the other plane, the first one, the crew was 11, giving us 9 and 11. In the first plane, that was Flight 11, that flew into the towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union. The crew of 11 had 81 passengers. 81 is 9 times 9, and it is also 8 plus 1 is 9. Also, 9 divided by 11 is 0.818181. In the second plane with the crew of 9, it had 56 passengers, and 5 plus 6 is 11. So in both planes, there was a 911, and then the two sets of crews gives us also 911, which just further confirms the significance of the 9 crew 17 minutes later, because that's when the second witness confirmed the matter, that it was an act of judgment from God. The duck boat was raised from the bottom of 220-foot deep Table Rock Lake in the early morning when the 220-pound rock fell on the western wall, 3.5 days after it sank just before sunset. Well, what is this a parallel with? This is a parallel with Jesus' crucifixion and his death when he was taken down from the cross just before sunset, and then was raised in the early morning 3.5 days later. And again, 220 hints at rock, which hints at Jesus. Which is why the duck boat was raised from the 220 feet deep Table Rock Lake on the day that the 220-pound rock fell from the western wall. And by the way, duck boats symbolize or look like little arks, which is symbolic of the rescue from Jesus. Jimmy Buffett and Island Escape, known for his island escapism music, which is why I believe his death is a sign that is ultimately also pointing to the coming escape from Manhattan Island after the dirty bomb explosion. Jimmy Buffett pioneered tropical rock, or trop rock. The quote-unquote Big 8 refers to his 8 famous songs. He died on September 1st, 2023, exactly 8 plus 8 plus 8 months before the Smashing Machine premiered at the Venice Film Festival on 9/1/2025. The Rock is Jesus. The Rock starred in the movie, and his connection is 8 plus 8 plus 8 months. The name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. Now, this release of the movie, The Smashing Machine, is the 44th prime number of days before this date of the prediction of the crash of the stock market, and the date hints at 23-0, which gives us another pairing of 23 and 44, which further confirms the relevance of this movie, The Smashing Machine, and that it is in fact hinting at the coming crash in the stock market. Dwayne Johnson gives us DJ, as I said earlier, which gives us 4 and 10, and 41, which hints at key, which is the Vatican symbol, and Pope Francis. Okay. The Rock, I already said all this. Why is it coming up again? Okay. I said this too. One thing I didn't say here is that, or did I say this? Well, no, I didn't say all of this. Okay. So on June 5th, 2024, it was reported that several concert goers at Red Rocks Amphitheater in Morrison, Colorado, witnessed a UFO. To be honest, my friend wrote this part, and I'm not exactly sure how this connects to Paul Simon or anything. I think Paul Simon is going to have a concert at the Red Rocks, or did. Anyway, let's just go through it. June 5th, 2024, it was 21 months or 91 weeks and 1 day, which is relevant to demons pretending to be aliens. Oh, yeah, to Paul Simon at Love Rocks on March 5th. So, yeah, Paul Simon's concert at Red Rocks is going to be this year on June 13th. Okay? Which will be exactly 1 year after he was in Boston. And this will be 153 weeks and 3 days, which gives us the 153 number, which is definitely relevant to Paul Simon. Okay, so this is all good. This is all great. This is all relevant. Okay, and by the way, there's nothing to be like skeptical about regarding this sighting of a UFO, because that's what's happening. It's happening everywhere, all over the place. Demons are pretending to be aliens and UFOs, but it's going to get, many thousands of times more obvious once the key opens the bottomless pit, okay? And the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. But all of this is about the coming demonic possession of those who take the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, which is why the 91 weeks and 1 day connection here from the UFO to Simon at Love Rocks, okay, from the Red Rocks. This is actually pretty astounding here, actually. Oh, my friend didn't get this, but it's in Morrison, Colorado, and that hints at Jim Morrison, the singer from The Doors. And the key opens the door to the bottomless pit. Fantastic. Wow.